Dinner that night was supposed to be simple. Just a quiet evening at a small restaurant not far from our apartment. My wife had invited two of her friends, and I didn't mind. I had just finished a long day at work. But I thought it would be nice to relax and spend some time together. The restaurant was warm and softly lit, filled with the sound of clinking glasses and quiet conversations. We sat at a round table near the window. My wife seemed cheerful, laughing with her friends as they talked about work, shopping, and weekend plans. I mostly stayed quiet, listening and smiling when appropriate. At first the conversation was harmless. One of her friends complained about how expensive everything had become lately: rent, groceries, even coffee. My wife nodded in agreement and began talking about our own expenses. "Seriously," she said while stirring her drink, "everything is so expensive these days. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one worrying about money." Her friends laughed sympathetically. I didn't think much of it. Couples complain about finances all the time, but then she said something that made the entire table go quiet for a moment. "Honestly," she added with a small laugh, "sometimes I feel like I'm married to a financial burden." The words hit me like a sudden slap. Her friends chuckled awkwardly, assuming she was joking. One of them glanced at me quickly as if checking my reaction. I forced a small smile, pretending it didn't bother me. But inside, something twisted painfully. For years, I had never talked much about money. I paid my share of the bills without complaint. I never bragged about the long nights I spent working extra projects, or the careful planning I did with my savings. I believed money wasn't something a relationship should revolve around. When we first married, we agreed that we would build our future together, step by step. She focused on her career, and I quietly handled the financial planning. I invested carefully, saved whenever possible, and even started a small online business on the side. But I never felt the need to announce it to her, I suppose. It looked like I was just an average guy with an average paycheck. Her friends kept laughing, trying to keep the mood light. "Oh, come on," one of them said jokingly. "At least he's nice." My wife shrugged casually. "Yeah, he's nice," she replied. "But nice doesn't pay the bills." Another round of laughter followed. I looked down at the table, staring at my untouched food. For a moment I wondered if she realized how humiliating that felt. Maybe she thought it was harmless teasing. Maybe she didn't think it mattered. But respect matters more than money. More than pride. I slowly reached for my phone in my pocket. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. If she truly believed I was a financial burden, then maybe it was time she saw the truth. The truth I had quietly built for years without saying a word. And tonight at this dinner table, I realized something important. Sometimes silence protects peace, but sometimes silence allows people to misunderstand who you really are. The laughter at the table slowly faded, but the words my wife had spoken kept echoing in my mind. A financial burden. She had said it so casually, as if it were just another harmless joke. Her friends were smiling, sipping their drinks, unaware that the moment had changed something inside me. I looked at her for a second. She seemed completely relaxed, scrolling through her phone, while the conversation shifted to another topic. To her, the comment probably meant nothing, but to me it meant everything. For years I had worked quietly while she slept late. On weekends I was often awake early, studying investment markets, managing small online projects, and planning long-term savings. I never talked about it because I believed success didn't need an audience. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, not even my own wife still. Hearing her say those words in front of others felt like a line had been crossed. I slowly unlocked my phone and opened my banking app. At first I just stared at the numbers on the screen. The balance reflected years of discipline, careful investments, profits from side businesses I built during late nights and early mornings. It wasn't just a little savings. It was a life plan. I took a quiet breath. Then I gently turned the phone toward her. "Hey," I said calmly, "take a look at this." She looked confused at first, leaning slightly closer to see the screen. Her friends also leaned in out of curiosity. For a moment nobody spoke. Her eyes moved across the numbers once. Then again, her relaxed smile slowly disappeared. "What is this?" she asked quietly. "My bank account," I replied. The table fell completely silent. One of her friends blinked in surprise. "Wait, that's real." I nodded calmly. My wife looked at me again, this time with a completely different expression. The confidence she had earlier was gone, replaced by confusion and maybe a little shock. You have this much money?" she asked. "I've been saving and investing for years," I said, along with some small businesses I started online. Her friends exchanged glances, clearly impressed. The same people who had laughed moments ago were now staring at me, like they had misjudged something important. My wife looked almost embarrassed. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked softly. I shrugged because I didn't think it mattered. I said honestly, money wasn't supposed to define us. She didn't respond immediately. Her fingers tightened slightly around her glass as she processed what she had just seen. One of her friends cleared her throat awkwardly. "Well, I guess he's not a financial burden." Nobody laughed this time. The atmosphere at the table had completely changed. I locked my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. I never cared about proving anything. I continued calmly, but being called a burden in front of everyone, that felt unfair. My wife looked down at the table for the first time that evening. She seemed unsure of what to say. The silence between us grew heavier with every passing second. Finally, I pushed my chair back and stood up. "I think I'm going to head home," I said quietly. Her head lifted quickly. "Wait, you're leaving?" I looked at her for a moment before answering, "Yeah." I said, "I think I need some air." And with that, I turned and walked away from the table, leaving behind shocked faces, unfinished food, and a truth that had changed everything. The restaurant door closed behind me with a soft click, but inside my head, the moment still echoed loudly. My wife's words kept repeating over and over. A financial burden. The night air outside was cool and calm. Cars passed slowly on the street, their headlights sliding across the pavement. I stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath, letting the silence settle around me. Strangely, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt clear. For years, I had believed that love meant patience. It meant supporting each other quietly without keeping score. I never wanted our marriage to feel like a competition about who earned more or who contributed more financially. That's why I stayed silent about my savings, my investments, and the small businesses I built during late nights. I wanted our relationship to be about partnership. Not numbers, but respect is different. Respect is something every relationship needs to survive. And tonight, something about the way she said those words, laughing in front of her friends, made me realize that respect had slowly disappeared. Somewhere along the way, my phone suddenly started vibrating in my pocket. I didn't need to check to know who it was still. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. Her name flashed across it, calling. I let it ring a few seconds later. It stopped then. A message appeared. "Where did you go? Please come back. I didn't mean it like that." I stared at the screen for a moment before locking the phone again. Another call came almost immediately. Then another message. "I'm sorry if that hurt you. It was just a joke. A joke." Funny how jokes only feel harmless to the person who says them. I began walking slowly down the sidewalk, my hands in my pockets. The city lights reflected off the windows of nearby buildings, and the sound of distant traffic filled the quiet night. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't her. It was an unknown number. When I opened the message, I realized it was one of her friends from the dinner. "Hey, I just wanted to say, I think she went too far. That wasn't fair to you." A few seconds later, another message followed. "Honestly, we had no idea about your business stuff." That's impressive. I didn't reply. Their opinions didn't matter to me. What mattered was what had already been said back at the restaurant. I imagined the awkward silence that must have followed after I left. The same people who had laughed earlier were probably now whispering about the situation. Maybe my wife was trying to explain. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe she was angry at herself. Or maybe she was angry at me. My phone rang again. Her name. For a moment I considered answering. But then I remembered the look on her face when she said those words. The casual way she dismissed my efforts as if they meant nothing. I pressed the power button and silenced the call. Tonight wasn't about money. It never was. It was about something much more important. And as I continued walking through the quiet streets, one thought slowly became clearer in my mind. Sometimes the hardest truth to accept in a marriage is realizing that the person beside you might not value you the way you believe they did. By the time I reached my car, the street had grown quieter. The restaurant lights glowed behind me, but I didn't turn back. I sat inside the car for a moment, staring through the windshield, while my phone continued vibrating on the passenger seat. Her name kept appearing on the screen, call after call, message after message. I picked up the phone and finally opened the chat. "Please answer. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you. Can we talk?" I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes for a second. Part of me wanted to believe her apology immediately. After all, this was the woman I had married. The woman I once believed would always stand beside me, but another part of me couldn't ignore how easily those words had left her mouth. Earlier that night, a financial burden. You don't say something like that in front of people, unless somewhere deep down you actually believe it. I started the car engine, but I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I let the engine idle while I thought about the past few years. There had been small signs before. Little comments about money, comparisons with her friends' husbands, casual jokes about how I was too quiet about finances at the time. I brushed them off. I believed she was just stressed or speaking without thinking. But tonight it felt different. Tonight it was public, humiliating, and once respect disappears in a relationship, rebuilding it becomes much harder than people realize. My phone buzzed again, another message. Everyone is staring at me here. Please come back. I read it twice. For a moment, I imagined walking back into that restaurant, sitting down again, pretending everything was normal. But I knew it wouldn't be. Something had shifted between us, and deep down she knew it too. I placed the phone on the dashboard and finally began driving. The roads were nearly empty, streetlights passing one after another, as I moved through the quiet city. When I reached our apartment, the place felt unusually silent. Her shoes were by the door. Her favorite coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter from that morning. For the first time in a long while, the apartment didn't feel like home. I walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. Slowly, I pulled out a small travel bag and placed it on the bed. I didn't pack much, just a few clothes, my laptop and some documents. This wasn't about running away. It was about giving both of us space to think. Before leaving, I opened my banking app again. I transferred enough money into our shared account to cover the rent and bills for the next few months. Then I sent her one final message. You never married a financial burden. You married someone who believed in building a future quietly. But respect matters more than money. I stared at the message for a moment before pressing send. Seconds later, the phone started ringing again. Her name flashed across the screen, but this time I didn't answer. I picked up my bag, turned off the lights, and walked out the door. As I stepped into the quiet night, one realization settled firmly in my mind. Money can build comfort, but respect is what truly holds a relationship together. And sometimes the hardest decision isn't proving your worth. It's choosing to walk away when someone fails to see it.